breaking news about Bill Cosby.
Bill Cosby is one of the biggest predators in Hollywood.
He had a pattern of drugging women.
Dozens of women.
A lot of people knew.
How dare you speak out against Bill Cosby? He's an icon. We never knew Cosby.
Cosby's real daughter came forward.
I can send a message now.
I would never want Bill Cosby as a real father.
He's strict, and that rubs you the wrong way.
This is what happens when you stand up to Cosby.
His kink is about control.
Just imagine yourself unconscious.
But now, over 25 years later, we finally know what Cosby really did to his daughters.
For decades, Bill Cosby was one of the most beloved figures in American entertainment. He played Dr. Cliff Huxtable on The Cosby Show, a father figure who embodied warmth, wisdom, and family values. He won Emmy Awards, influenced generations of comedians, and became known simply as America's Dad. But behind the public persona was a pattern of predatory behavior that spanned nearly 5 decades. More than 60 women came forward with allegations that Cosby had drugged and sexually assaulted them. In 2018, he became the first major celebrity convicted in the #MeToo era. Then, in a stunning turn, his conviction was overturned on a legal technicality in 2021. This is the story of how one man's fame became a shield, how survivors fought for decades to be heard, and how a case that should have brought justice instead revealed deep flaws in our legal system.
William Henry Cosby Jr. was born on July 12, 1937, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He grew up in public housing, the son of a maid and a Navy serviceman. Despite economic hardships, Cosby was naturally gifted, funny, intelligent, and charismatic. He dropped out of high school to join the Navy but later earned his diploma through correspondence courses, eventually attending Temple University on a track and field scholarship. It was during his time at Temple that Cosby discovered his true calling, comedy. He began performing at small clubs in Philadelphia, developing a clean, observational style that set him apart from the edgier comedians of the 1960s. His humor focused on childhood, family, and everyday situations, material that was accessible to audiences of all backgrounds. By the mid-1960s, Cosby had become a successful stand-up comedian with several popular comedy albums. His big break came in 1965 when he was cast in I Spy, an espionage television series where he played Alexander Scott, an undercover agent. The role was groundbreaking. Cosby became the first African-American to star in a dramatic television series, and he won 3 consecutive Emmy Awards for his performance. Throughout the 1970s, Cosby's career continued to flourish. He created and starred in The Bill Cosby Show, produced the animated series Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids, and became a popular spokesman for products like Jell-O pudding. He also pursued education seriously, earning a master's degree and eventually a doctorate in education from the University of Massachusetts Amherst in 1976. But it was The Cosby Show, which premiered in 1984, that cemented his status as a cultural icon. The sitcom featured the Huxtable family, an upper-middle-class African-American family headed by Cliff, an obstetrician, and his wife Claire, an attorney. The show was revolutionary in its portrayal of a successful black family that dealt with universal parenting challenges while celebrating their culture and heritage. The Cosby Show became one of the most watched programs in America, dominating the Nielsen ratings for years. It revitalized NBC's primetime lineup and demonstrated that shows centered on black families could achieve mainstream success. Cosby's portrayal of Cliff Huxtable made him a father figure to millions of Americans regardless of race. By the 1990s, Bill Cosby had achieved a level of fame and influence that few entertainers ever reach. He was wealthy, respected, and held up as a moral voice in American culture. He gave speeches about personal responsibility, education, and family values. Parents trusted him. Children admired him. He had become, in the public imagination, the embodiment of decency and respectability. This reputation would make what came next all the more difficult for people to accept. The first public accusation against Bill Cosby came much earlier than most people realize. In January 2000, a young woman named LaSheel Covington filed a police report in New York City claiming that Cosby had inappropriately touched her. However, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office declined to prosecute, citing insufficient evidence. 4 years later, in 2004, Andrea Constan, a former Temple University employee, reported to police in Ontario, Canada, that Cosby had drugged and sexually assaulted her at his home in Pennsylvania in January 2004. Constan had known Cosby through her work with Temple's basketball program, and he had positioned himself as a mentor to her. According to Constan, Cosby had invited her to his home to discuss her career. He gave her what he described as herbal medication to help her relax. After taking the pills, she became incapacitated and unable to resist as Cosby sexually assaulted her. When she regained full consciousness hours later, she was confused and disoriented about what had happened. Initially, Constan did not report the assault. Like many survivors, she struggled with feelings of shame, confusion, and fear that she wouldn't be believed, especially given Cosby's stature and reputation. It took her over a year to come forward to authorities. The Montgomery County District Attorney's Office in Pennsylvania investigated Constan's allegations but ultimately decided not to file criminal charges in February 2005. The DA cited concerns about the time that had elapsed, the lack of physical evidence, and the difficulties of proving the case beyond a reasonable doubt. However, Constan pursued a civil lawsuit against Cosby in March 2005. As her case moved forward, something significant happened. Other women began coming forward with similar stories. 13 women agreed to testify as witnesses in Constan's civil case, describing remarkably consistent patterns of behavior by Cosby. These women described how Cosby had positioned himself as a mentor or friend, offered them pills or drinks that he claimed would help them relax or with various ailments, and then sexually assaulted them when they were incapacitated. Many of the incidents allegedly occurred in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, decades before Constan's experience. The similarities in the accounts were striking. The women came from different backgrounds, lived in different cities, and had no connection to each other. Yet their descriptions of Cosby's behavior followed an almost identical pattern: trust building, isolation, drugging, and assault. In November 2006, Cosby settled Constan's civil lawsuit for an undisclosed amount. The settlement included a confidentiality agreement, which meant the details of the case and the testimony of the other women would not become public. The story largely faded from public attention, and Cosby's reputation remained intact for most Americans who were unaware of the allegations. For years, the allegations against Bill Cosby remained largely unknown to the general public. When they were mentioned, they were often dismissed or minimized. Cosby's fame, wealth, and carefully cultivated image made it difficult for accusers to be taken seriously. His legal team was formidable, and the entertainment industry seemed reluctant to acknowledge the growing number of accusations. But in October 2014, comedian Hannibal Buress performed a stand-up routine in Philadelphia that would change everything. During his set, Buress called Cosby a rapist and criticized him for his sanctimonious lectures to the black community about morality and personal responsibility. A video of the routine went viral online, suddenly bringing the allegations against Cosby to a much wider audience. The Buress routine created a catalyst moment. Suddenly, the allegations that had been whispered about in entertainment circles for years were being discussed openly. Media outlets began investigating and reporting on the accusations in detail. Social media amplified the stories, making it impossible for the mainstream public to ignore them any longer. In the weeks and months following the Buress routine, more women came forward. Barbara Bowman, who had tried to tell her story years earlier without being believed, spoke to the Washington Post. Journalist Joan Tarshis wrote about her alleged assault by Cosby in the 1960s. Model Janice Dickinson revealed that Cosby had allegedly drugged and raped her in 1982. The flood of accusations became impossible to dismiss. By 2015, more than 50 women had publicly accused Cosby of sexual assault, with allegations spanning from the 1960s to the 2000s. The accusers included actresses, models, journalists, and women who had simply encountered Cosby through their work or social connections. The pattern described by the women was consistent and disturbing. Cosby would typically offer himself as a mentor, particularly to young women trying to break into entertainment. He would invite them to dinners, meetings, or his home, positioning these encounters as professional opportunities. At some point he would offer them a pill or a drink, claiming it was medication for headaches, stress, or other ailments. Once the women became incapacitated, he would sexually assault them. Many of the women described waking up hours later, confused and disoriented, with physical evidence that they had been assaulted but with gaps in their memory about what had occurred. Some described confronting Cosby afterward, only to be dismissed or threatened. Others remained silent for decades, fearing they wouldn't be believed or that speaking out would destroy their careers. The volume and consistency of the allegations made them increasingly difficult to ignore. Yet Cosby continued to deny all accusations, and his legal team worked to discredit accusers and prevent legal action. The emergence of so many allegations in 2014 and 2015 prompted prosecutors to take a fresh look at Andrea Constance's case. In December 2015, just days before the statute of limitations would expire, Montgomery County District Attorney-elect Kevin Steele filed criminal charges against Bill Cosby for the alleged assault of Andrea Constance. Cosby was charged with 3 counts of aggravated indecent assault. Each count carried a potential sentence of 5 to 10 years in prison. For the first time, Cosby faced the possibility of criminal conviction and imprisonment. The decision to prosecute was complicated by events that had occurred a decade earlier. In 2005, when the previous district attorney decided not to file criminal charges, he had reportedly given Cosby assurances that he would not be prosecuted. Based on these assurances, Cosby had testified in Constance's civil lawsuit, and because he believed he couldn't face criminal charges, he made statements that were potentially incriminating. Cosby's defense team argued that prosecuting him now violated his Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination and constituted a breach of the agreement with the previous prosecutor. This legal issue would eventually prove crucial to the case's outcome. The first trial began in June 2017. Prosecutors presented Andrea Constance's testimony about the assault, along with testimony from one additional accuser, Kelly Johnson, who described a similar pattern of behavior by Cosby. The defense argued that Constance's relationship with Cosby had been consensual and romantic, and they questioned why she had continued contact with him after the alleged assault. After 6 days of deliberations, the jury was deadlocked, and the judge declared a mistrial. The case would have to be tried again. The retrial began in April 2018. This time, prosecutors were allowed to present testimony from 5 additional accusers who described similar patterns of behavior by Cosby spanning decades. The additional testimony was intended to show a pattern of conduct, demonstrating that the alleged assault of Constance was not an isolated incident but part of a long-standing pattern of predatory behavior. On April 26, 2018, the jury found Bill Cosby guilty on all 3 counts of aggravated indecent assault. The verdict marked a watershed moment, the first major celebrity conviction in the #MeToo era. Cosby, then 80 years old, faced the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison. In September 2018, Judge Stephen O'Neill sentenced Cosby to 3 to 10 years in state prison. The judge also designated Cosby a sexually violent predator, a classification that would require him to register as a sex offender and undergo counseling for life. For many of Cosby's accusers, the conviction and sentence represented a measure of justice after decades of being dismissed and disbelieved. For advocates of survivors of sexual assault, the case demonstrated that even powerful men could be held accountable for their actions. On June 30, 2021, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court made a decision that shocked survivors, advocates, and much of the public. They overturned Bill Cosby's conviction and ordered his immediate release from prison. The court's decision was not based on Cosby's innocence or on doubts about the evidence against him. Instead, the ruling focused on the legal agreement that the previous prosecutor had reportedly made in 2005, when he declined to file criminal charges but assured Cosby he would not be prosecuted. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court held that the subsequent prosecution violated Cosby's due process rights. The court reasoned that Cosby had relied on the prosecutor's assurance when he testified in the civil case, giving up his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. That testimony was later used against him in the criminal trial. According to the court, allowing this violated fundamental principles of fairness. The ruling was narrow and specific to the unique circumstances of Cosby's case. It did not exonerate him or declare him innocent. The court explicitly stated that their decision was based solely on the procedural issue of prosecutorial conduct, not on the merits of the allegations against him. Nevertheless, the practical effect was clear. Bill Cosby walked free after serving less than 3 years of his sentence. He returned to his home in Pennsylvania, and under the court's ruling, he could never be retried for the assault of Andrea Constand. The decision was devastating for many survivors. Andrea Const and released a statement expressing disappointment but noting that the ruling didn't change what had happened to her or to the dozens of other women who had come forward. Advocates for sexual assault survivors worried that the decision would discourage other survivors from reporting assaults, fearing that legal technicalities could prevent justice even when evidence was strong. The Bill Cosby case represents more than just the story of one man's crimes and the legal system's response. It exposed systemic issues that had allowed powerful men to abuse their positions for decades with little accountability. One of the most significant revelations from the case was how institutions had failed to act on warning signs. Multiple women had tried to report Cosby's behavior over the years, but their allegations were dismissed, minimized, or buried. Entertainment industry figures later admitted they had heard rumors about Cosby for years but chose not to investigate or speak out. The case also highlighted the challenges survivors face when reporting sexual assault, particularly when the accused is wealthy, famous, and well-connected. Many of Cosby's accusers described being threatened, intimidated, or simply not believed when they tried to tell their stories. The power imbalance between Cosby and his victims made it extremely difficult for them to seek justice. The statute of limitations issue was particularly significant. Many of Cosby's alleged assaults occurred decades before the accusers came forward. By the time they felt able to report, the criminal statute of limitations had expired in most cases. This legal reality meant that even with credible allegations and consistent patterns of behavior, prosecution was impossible for the vast majority of alleged crimes. Following the Cosby case, several states reformed their statute of limitations laws for sexual assault, recognizing that survivors often need years or even decades to process trauma and come forward. These reforms represented an acknowledgement that the legal system had not adequately accounted for the psychological realities of sexual trauma. The case also became a touchstone in the #MeToo movement, which gained momentum in 2017. Cosby's conviction in 2018 seemed to validate the experiences of countless survivors and demonstrated that even the most powerful men could face consequences. The subsequent overturning of his conviction was a reminder that legal accountability remains complicated and imperfect. As of 2024, Bill Cosby remains a free man. He has continued to deny all allegations of sexual misconduct and has attempted to rebuild his public image, though his reputation has been irreparably damaged. His legacy as a pioneering entertainer has been forever complicated by the credible allegations of dozens of women. The women who accused Cosby have experienced varying outcomes. Some have found healing through speaking their truth publicly. Others continue to struggle with the trauma of their experiences and the frustration of seeing Cosby walk free despite overwhelming evidence of a pattern of predatory behavior. Andrea Constand has become an advocate for survivors, speaking about her experience and the importance of believing those who come forward with allegations of sexual assault. Many of the other accusers have similarly used their platforms to support survivors and push for systemic changes in how sexual assault is addressed. The Bill Cosby case raises difficult questions about justice, power, and accountability. It demonstrates how fame and wealth can shield perpetrators from consequences for decades. It shows how institutional failures and societal reluctance to believe survivors can allow abuse to continue unchecked. The legal outcome, a conviction followed by reversal on procedural grounds, leaves many with a sense that justice was incomplete. Prosecutors made errors that ultimately prevented accountability. The legal system, for all its processes and procedures, failed to provide clear resolution for the survivors. Yet the case also demonstrated the power of survivors speaking out and supporting each other. The fact that more than 60 women found the courage to come forward publicly, knowing they would face scrutiny and disbelief, represents a profound act of collective courage. Their willingness to share their stories has undoubtedly helped other survivors feel less alone and more empowered to report abuse. The Cosby case serves as a reminder that legal justice and moral truth don't always align. The court's decision to overturn his conviction was based on legal principles that exist for important reasons: protecting defendants' rights and ensuring prosecutorial fairness. Yet this legal outcome coexists with the reality that dozens of women have credibly accused Cosby of remarkably similar patterns of predatory behavior spanning decades. As society continues to grapple with issues of sexual misconduct, power, and accountability, the Bill Cosby case remains a significant and troubling chapter. It illustrates both how far we've come in believing and supporting survivors and how much work remains to create systems that truly deliver justice.